I remember every Sunday we'd have a family dinner, and the whole family would come. They'd all come from Pennsylvania. And I also remember how I would get slapped or backhanded or punched, knocked off my chair in front of everybody, and how nobody would even move a muscle. They would all just look at me with this pity in their eyes. Although now I look back and I'm wondering if there was just a little bit of pleasure and glee. But nobody ever stood up on my behalf. Nobody ever said that 6 hours being grounded in your room was too much for a child. Nobody ever said that getting hit with a hammer or punched in the nose should never have happened. And John had this habit of doing things exactly like that, especially in public places. He loved to shock people. Plus, I also think he wanted to see what he could really get away with. Unfortunately, he could get away with quite a bit. The few people who did try to stand up for me a couple of times quickly backed down. I don't know whether that was due to fear of John. He was a pretty big man, over 300 pounds. But the fact that he was beating on a little girl like that in full public view and nobody seemed to do anything about it is what I even find disturbing today. Family that have secrets like that look nice from the outside, but they're really rotten deep down in their core. My family never tried to support me. They never tried to help me get on my feet. In fact, they couldn't stand being in my sight because every time they looked at me, they were reminded of what they themselves failed to do. My family has stolen from me. They have lied to me. They have lied about me. They still lie about me. They have played the victim for the past 40-some years when the only victim here was me. A child who grows up in a home where abuse is permitted is a child who is living in survival mode. And it's so easy to trigger a child into survival mode. Given that their nervous system is still developing, the human beings are survival mechanisms are innately designed. They automatically take over anytime we face with fear. So a child who is abused in the way that I was is unable to come out of survival mode because there's nowhere that they feel safe. There's just no way to feel safe in a home that is actively hiding child neglect, molestation, and maltreatment. I'm currently waiting on disability. Due to the abuse that I went through, I have no doubt I have brain damage. No thanks to doctors or mental health professionals. You know, it took them 30 years to diagnose me with PTSD and disassociation. In fact, they never even mentioned either of those two words for the 30 years that I did go, or 40 years that I did see counselors and doctors. Doctors go through their entire education and never even hear the word trauma once, when trauma is the number one cause of illnesses, whether mental or physical, and it always stems from childhood. Parents are always like, oh, well, you're an adult now, it's not, we raised you right. Well, unfortunately, that's not how it works. Children, our childhood is the literal blueprint to our lives. So whatever happens in our childhood, unless we become aware of whether or not it was dysfunctional, we are going to be affected by it. And children who grow up in chaotic and unpredictable homes are going to be 18-year-old adults who are in survival mode. Yelling at a child will put them into survival mode. We are coming from generations who would beat their children for having a natural emotional reaction. It's a trauma-based society. We have adults nowadays who are still adamant that people are overreacting and that emotions and feelings are silly, when in fact they have their own immense energetic presence. After all, we are meat suits with little vortexes of energy. So whatever happens to block that energy, it blocks the flow of our natural life and steers us off course. You know, for years the family blamed me for not being able to succeed in life, while completely ignoring the fact that I was abused the first 18 years of my life, or the fact that I didn't have any support from any of them, while watching everybody else receive the support that they needed at the times that they needed. And then being told that I was selfish whenever I called attention to this. That is called gaslighting. When somebody tells you you're too emotional, or that you're being selfish, what they're really doing is projecting how they are onto you. The fact that I have been told I was selfish for asking family for help, it still kind of astonishes me nowadays. I don't understand how, even now, like with my siblings, they're adults, they raised their own kid. I would have thought that they would have seen that it was not only not their fault, but seen how they have been treating me. Unfortunately, they either don't see it or they just don't give a shit and really feel that I deserve it. Either way, who would want to be around people like that? They talk about me as if they know exactly who I am, but they've never known who I am, because they've never been able to tell a straight truth about me. They cannot see who I am if they can't see that a part of who I am is what had happened to me. And because they can't accept it themselves, whether that's due to the abuse that they themselves went through, because, I know John abused everybody in the family. I would be surprised if there was one child who had ever gotten away from him. The man was not your typical pedophile that they say that they are. This man was proud. He was a sociopath. And people enabled him. And I mean, they enabled him long before I even came in the picture. Even after he abused people in their family. So this is a generational thing. It's not a every once in a while. If there's somebody in a family who is being ostracized and isolated, I can guarantee you that that person has some truth that the rest of the family is trying to keep quiet. People do not cut out your tongue if they're not afraid that you are going to say something. Do you know what I mean? They have worked for 30 years at destroying my character and my reputation because they failed to protect me as a child. Whether they did that deliberately or whether they did the best they could, it doesn't matter at this point because nothing has changed. And they're still adamant that they were right and I was the only one who was wrong. Which means they're only going to pass on that cycle to their kids and then their grandkids and then their grandkids. And they're going to teach them to keep things secret that really should be out in the open, that shouldn't be allowed to be happening. Hiding abuse is generational. It's taught. Families teach their children. Your cousins, your aunts teach your cousins. My nieces and nephews at one point hated me because of what the family was lying about. But once I started speaking up, it's as soon as I start speaking up and standing up for myself, I end up getting kicked out or the cops end up getting called. The second that I can walk away from this family and not look back is this very second that I'll finally be able to begin my life. Because up till now, the people that have been around me have done everything they could to make sure that I didn't live. They did everything they could to make sure I was barely surviving because they felt good about themselves being able to exert power over someone who had a heart.